Hello and welcome along to this special edition of the Mourneview Monthly. I'm Michael Scott. The January transfer window was closed and that's provided us with the perfect opportunity to have a chat with Glenavon chairman Adrian Tier. In an extensive interview with the Glenavon media team, he discusses the transfer window that's just closed, the club's finances and other matters on and off the park. Adrian, thanks very much for joining us. We thought it would be good to get a catch up and get an overview of the position of the club at the moment. Obviously now the January transfer window is closed. I wonder if we could start off just by getting your own overview on how the January transfer window went.
Well, of course, we lost 3 players in it through no fault of ours. Michal Glynn was recalled by Derry City and subsequently involved in transfer business. Joyce Doyle, who had been a student, got himself a full-time job in Dublin with an early start, and simply told us he wouldn't be back because he couldn't travel north now 2 or 3 times a week. And Conor Skinnell exercised his right as an amateur to join another club, primarily to be able to go on trials with cross-channel clubs. We had offered him professional terms, but on the advice of his agent he turned it down. So as an amateur he was free to go given the 7 days notice. So from that point of view, we were down players. Now, I know we only brought in 2 players who hopefully will settle into the side, do a good job for us in the 14 league games that have to come. But I know that Gary and Paul worked extensively looking at squad lists in all the NFL clubs, in all 3 divisions, to see is there somebody there that might do a job for us? Is there somebody there that's better than we have? And is there somebody there who might be available? And it was frightening, the small number that they were able to identify. Now, in the last fortnight, 3 Irish League managers came out saying the same thing that Gary said, that the January transfer window is a nightmare. There's just not players out there. And that's right. And one of them, I think, said, oh, the clubs are putting all their good players in 4-year contracts. Well, that's exactly what we have done. So I should add, incidentally, just to clarify things, at no stage did any club make a bid for Matthew Fitzpatrick, despite what the papers may have said, and I have had words with the journalist who wrote it. No bid was ever received from any club for Matthew Fitzpatrick. The other thing I think we need to emphasise is players do not come out of contract until the end of a season. The days when you could sign a player from August to December or what have you have gone. So all professional players are tied to their clubs to the end of the season. And ostensibly that really means that the players you can pick up are amateur players. And, you know, if amateur players are worth their while, the clubs have signed them pro. So it's been a very difficult market out there. But from the Glenavon point of view, Gary decides who he wants to sign, who he wants to release, okayed by the board. And when he's deciding who's going to sign, there's a whole lot of things to take into account. As I said earlier on, we want to recruit players who are better than what we have, players who are going to improve our squad. We've got to have a look at things like their track record, their injury record, their character, how they're going to fit in here, where do they live, do they drive. If Gary's satisfied and all that, then he'll come and talk to the office bearers about the financials. And generally speaking, Gary is a very astute custodian of his budget. He will not waste money. And the number of times that he said to me, I would not pay him such and such, he's only worth so and so. That's his judgment. And it's not up to me as chairman or indeed any director to go to Gary and say, you have to sign Joe Bloggs. Because then if Gary signs him and Joe Bloggs doesn't work out, Gary can say, well, the chairman pushed me into signing him. And I think Gary respects that freedom that he has. And his record over the 11 odd years that he's been here on recruitment of experienced players and recruitment of very young players is excellent. Okay, might have got 1 or 2 wrong, but so did Alec Ferguson in his heyday. The other thing that's inhibited us now is that south of the border, both at league level and at non-league level. The wages have spiralled. And where we used to go to the like of the Leinster Senior League and we got some quite good players out of it, their wages have gone up and up and up to the extent that we would be offering them the same money to come up here, because obviously it's a step up for them. They've got to prove themselves and so forth. And financially, a lot of them think it's not worth it. But I have told Gary, and the board are aware of this, I have said to them, look, if there's a player out there that you really want, but you think he's maybe a bit expensive, and you'd like to get him if you could afford him, come and talk to me and we'll find the money. I mean, one of our supporters clubs, for example, the Spirit, put their hand up during January and said, we have some money if it helps to sign a player. That's what we need. But January is a very difficult market for players, very difficult. And I would defend any criticism that has been of Gary and Paul. I know the long hours they put in, the trawling squad list, the making phone calls and so forth. And there's no point in just signing players who are not as good as you have or are equal to what you have. You want to you want to wait and pick the right player, even you're paying him that wee bit of extra money because he's a good player.
Mm-hmm. I know there's concerns out there that maybe we didn't sign enough players, but I'm guessing, going by what you've just said, maybe, obviously given the reasons there are for that, you wouldn't be that concerned about that.
No, I mean, I don't want you to get the impression that Jordan Stewart is the only player that we talked to. I know Gary spoke to a whole lot of players, and a whole lot's putting it mildly. But to give you an idea of what he's up against, we offered one particular guy very good terms. And he was open with Gary. He said, look, I want to go and think about it, and I want to speak to other clubs. And Gary said, right, well, you come back to me. So nothing happened for a couple of weeks. And on the Sunday before the Tuesday that the deadline closed, he texted Gary and he said, I've been thinking, it might be in my best interest to go to Glenavon on loan for the rest of the season. Now, if you could read into that, there's a club lined up for next season and it's not Glenavon. So he was suiting himself, and that was disappointing. There's another guy we had spoken to who sounded as though he was keen to come, said that he wanted a bit of time because he would have been stepping down from being a full-timer to be a part-timer. Again, never came back. Now, hasn't moved actually, he's still at his club.
In terms of the players that left, did we do enough to try and persuade those players to stay? Was there anything we could have done?
In Michael Glenn's case, no. He was always, the loan agreement with Derry City was always up until January, and he was subject to recall. And obviously Derry used him in the transfer market as to bring Doherty back. Joyce Doyle simply said, I'm not coming back. I can't cope with the travelling now that I've got a full-time job. So what can you do? And it's not Gary's policy, and he's quite right, that players can only turn up here on a Saturday and play their football and do their training somewhere else. In Conor Skinnell's case, both Gary and Paul spoke to him, tried to persuade him to stay here. But our club policy, and Gary's quite right in this, if a player is with Glenavon, he's in the senior squad, he's playing Premier League football here in the north, if there's a club interested, come and watch him. Don't go on trial. Gary doesn't agree that they go on trial to this club, that club and the other club. The club can come watch him over here, playing at a high level, rather than playing in a practice match or playing against or with players that he's never seen in his life before. The other player we had was Sean Carey, that we got on loan from Shamrock Rovers, but he went back before the end of the window.
I know obviously you're not going to give us figures because you don't want other clubs to know, but financially, was Gary well backed in the transfer window? If he wanted to go and sign? Gary
was aware there's money there, and as I said to you, if somebody did drop down from the sky, to use my expression, that was maybe a wee bit more costly than we might be used to, Gary's aware, look, come and talk to us, we see what we can do.
Yeah. Just generally, I mean, what is the current state of the club financially? Are we in a good position? Are we okay?
We are in a very good position. We have an excellent treasurer, who guards the finances of the club as though they were his own. And without wanting to say too much, our financial position is comfortable.
Yeah. Obviously, there were stories that came out sort of over the last couple of days regarding another Irish League club. That club has since made a statement to sort of allay those fears. But is there a lesson to be learned from what we're hearing? Is there a danger that clubs could maybe chase those full-time clubs and overspend, and we don't want to do that?
That is happening. We don't want to do that. Our first aim as a board is to ensure the financial stability of the club. Our second aim is to retain our Premiership status, and they can go hand in hand. And round the table, we are sensible enough to know that if some of the full-time clubs are in there bidding for a player, we're not going to count.
Yeah. Well, funny you mentioned that. I was sort of wondering as well. There's a lot of talk out there from people, who maybe see what we're doing at the club, and you've mentioned there, we're happy to have the club financially stable and retain our Premiership status, but maybe that's it. Is that the case, or does the club, as a board, are you looking to progress, or
no,
are you just happy at that level?
I mean, probably our minimum aim in a season is to try and finish 7th and get into that playoff spot. But we always harbour ambitions to get into the top 6 and start to push on. And maybe in Irish League football we're going through a bit of a transition stage at the minute. It's all about the full-time clubs. And if the full-time club, as is proved to this club, they've robbed us of people like Reece Marshall, for example. If a full-time club comes in for a player who's part-time, we can't compete with those wages. But there will always be good players available who want to play part-time because of their jobs. The Matthew Fitzpatricks and Mark Hockeys of this world, people like that, they will always be available.
There's people out there who maybe think as well the club's gone a bit stale. What would you say to them? Obviously we're sitting currently at the time of recording 8th in the league, I think I'm right in saying.
Yeah, I mean, it's a disappointment where we're sitting at the minute, and if we've been beaten at Carrick last week, for example, where we're down to 9th, that's disappointing for us, because as I say, at the start of the season you aspire to finish at least 7th, and it's going to be a struggle to do that. But I was going to make the point to you about the full-time clubs. I don't think this will last. There's a whole sort of build up at the minute, full-time football, this, that and the other. I've made it clear that in my opinion the Irish League will certainly in the foreseeable future will not be a full-time provide full-time football. And people, as I say, the likes of Fitzy, the likes of Mark Hockey and people like that don't want full-time football. They just want to play football because they've got good jobs. So I just don't see full-time football working for all 12 clubs or whatever it is in the Premiership.
Yeah.
To pick you up on the stale bit, that probably emanates from the fact that players have gone and we haven't got new players in. We're playing today, for example, in the Cup, and we had 3 or 4 new players signed in the transfer window. I think people will be saying, "Oh, the new boys are all out today," But it's been a difficult January. We're not the only club that said that, and we're not the only club that's only signed 1 player.
Yeah. Results-wise, it's been difficult for us. How do you feel? It's obviously you're disappointed at how the season has gone, but there's also been a lot of talk amongst supporters regarding Gary's position and his future at the club. I mean, how do you see it? I know you have a good relationship with Gary. Obviously, you back him.
Yeah, I mean, the board has got to back the manager. It's as simple as that. But Gary's long enough in the game to know it's a results business. And our results this season in certain games, our performances in this season in certain games and our results in certain games have been disappointing. And the main thing seems to be that the team can rise to the occasion when we play a top 6 club, be it home or away. But when we play a bottom 6 club, we're struggling. Now, I've talked to Gary about this, and Gary's given me his own explanations, which I'm not going to come out with here for obvious reasons. But that's a big worry to me personally, that we cannot easily overcome the other teams that are down there. And people will say, oh, the other teams in the top 6 are signing players and so forth. But I would say, how many of those would we have signed who are better than what we have? Very few.
Just finally then, Adrian, because we've covered transfers there's one other thing I want to talk to you about, and that was stadium development. And I know there was a talk, I'm not sure when it was, of developments, particularly in relation to the Crescent End, safe standing, things like that. And not just that there, but other developments as well.
The Crescent Stand, the safe standing will happen.
Have we any idea when?
In the not too distant future.
Okay.
But it will happen. We're committed to that.
Is there anything else in the pipeline, or?
Well, like a whole lot of other clubs, we're sitting waiting on this 36.2 million or whatever it's going to be when it eventually does come. And I think our plans on that are fairly well known. But again, we're sitting waiting to see what the criteria is, what the balance funding that we will have to provide, because nowadays you just can't go to a bank as you used to be able to do and say, I want to borrow X amount of money because this is what we're getting from government, you know. We will have to find that money ourselves from various sources, but we're confident in the scheme that we have in mind that we will be able to do that, and that, you know, a new dressing room accommodation, a new restaurant, community offices, etc., that we had planned for down there, and the link up with the main get a stand here, we're confident that that will maintain Mourneview's position as one of the best clubs in the Irish League.
Well, Adrian, thank you very much for speaking to us. Hopefully that will have addressed a lot of queries that supporters will have had.
Well, that's why I was anxious to do this, and I'm quite happy to do it at any time. It's not an easy job being on the board, not an easy job being chairman. But you know what I would say to the supporters is the 10 people that sit around that table as the board of directors are all Glenavon fans. There's none of us pulling the other way. There's none of us wanting to upset the apple cart. We are all out to do our best for Glenavon, put the best team out on the park that we can possibly afford. It's as simple as that.